Hey, what's going on everybody? Mr. Buddy here, and today I'm going to be going over all of the ideas and content I either cut out or changed in my What If England Was a Pokemon Region video. Now for those who don't know, while my regional videos are very long, there's always a lot of ideas I end up either taking out entirely or changing for various reasons. And these cut content videos detail all of those things that don't end up making it into my final videos. Now I probably don't need to say this, but just in case you haven't seen my official video about what England could be like as a Pokemon region yet, I highly suggest you see it before watching this video because, as I mentioned, this one is all about things I took out of that video, and it's meant to be seen as more of an addition to that regional video rather than a standalone video. I should also mention, while we're still in the intro, that this video isn't going to be quite as polished as my official regional video is, so a lot of my ideas don't have any art to accompany them. I'm doing this partially unscripted and while I'm sick, and many of the ideas I'll be sharing aren't quite as fleshed out or detailed as they would be in a full regional video. Alright, I think that's enough intro stuff. Let's dive in now and take a look at my removed and changed ideas from my England Pokemon region. Let's start off by talking about all the locations and areas that were either cut out or changed from the finished video. Probably the thing I'll get a ton of comments about on the final video is why did I just do England as a Pokemon region instead of the entire UK? And I think this cut content video is the perfect place to bring up that I did initially try to make a Pokemon region that was based on all 4 of the UK countries, but it just didn't come together. As I started mapping things out, and I think I have an early work in progress I can show, from when I tried to make England, Scotland, and Wales into one giant region, I felt like I was spreading all the landmarks and cities just a little bit too thin across what was a pretty large region in terms of landmass. Also, adding on to that, when all of the UK countries were combined into one giant region, I felt like I wasn't giving each of the countries the justice they deserved. England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, while similar in many ways, such as their folklore and mythology, are also very unique in and of themselves and have their own culture that transcends just being part of the UK. Once that dawned on me, I felt like it would be better to focus on England for this regional video, and then later down the road I could make individual regions on Scotland, Ireland, and Wales where I could actually flesh them out as a region and infuse a lot of their specific culture into them. Now in the final video I did pull a few ideas from the mythology and folklore found all throughout the UK, but I still intend to one day come back to the United Kingdom and do regions about Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. Okay, so that was an early version of the region as a whole that drew upon the United Kingdom in general before I reined it back in. And now I want to get into a few specific places that I cut from the region when I decided that it would be based on England solely. First up, we have an island off to the western side of the region that you could access in the post-game, and it would have been based on an island called the Isle of Man. In real life, from what I understand, this island is technically part of the United Kingdom, but is also a self-governing island that is independent from England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. It might seem a little bit random at first to include this island in the region, but what really piqued my interest about the Isle of Man when I was researching it was that it had a brief history with Vikings in its semi-ancient past. Now you guys probably know where I'm going with this, but I thought it would be really cool to have this island potentially be a post-game area you go to, and then include a cameo from Team Berserk, the evil team in my Scandinavia region on the island. The general idea is that this would have all taken place before the events of the Scandinavia region, so when you arrive on the island, Sigurd is there with Kara and the two of them are gathering resources and supplies for when they eventually invade the Scandinavia region. You would get to explore the island a little bit, finding some rare Pokemon that are native to my Scandinavian region, and then you get to have a small post-game battle with Sigurd and Kara for fun. They wouldn't explicitly say that they're gathering supplies for their inevitable invasion, but if you have a dragon type with you, Sigurd would have a special dialogue where he talks about his relationship with dragon types and that he has to fulfill his calling in life. Now if you can't tell, I love this idea, but why I ended up cutting this island out of the region was for 2 reasons. Number 1, the Isle of Man is technically not part of England, and I really wanted to make the region focused, at least geographically, on things within England. And number 2, I was worried that if I threw Team Berserk into the video, I might be including too many characters. This leans a little bit into the story stuff, but the main narrative of my region already had so many characters and people doing things within it, and I was worried that having a cameo from Team Berserk, even though it would have been pretty small, might have been just a little bit too much in terms of the amount of characters, so I ended up taking the Isle of Man out of the region. I don't know, maybe I'll include this idea in a Scotland region or potentially a Wales region, but for right now, this is one of my favorite areas and side quests I ended up cutting out. Alright, the final location I ended up removing was something that I was originally going to talk about in the final video, but the audio I recorded for it got messed up and I didn't have enough time to go back and redo it, so I had to take it out. The area was a route based on England's Jurassic Coast, which would have been in between the West Lulworth town and the Stonehenge area. The Jurassic Coast in England is an area that has a ton of fossil activity, and this would have been a route where you battle a ton of fossil maniacs, and you'd also have a chance to get your own fossil that you could then revive later in the region. I really wish the audio hadn't gotten so messed up because this was a pretty cool area, but alas, sometimes things happen. Alright, my voice is getting gradually worse as we go along, so let's talk about some of the new Pokemon ideas I had for this region that unfortunately didn't end up making the final cut. While there are a lot of removed Pokemon ideas from this England region, many of them are heavily linked to other countries within the UK, and I kind of want to save those ideas for when I eventually do countries like Scotland or Wales as Pokemon regions. That being said, I didn't want to just leave you guys hanging with nothing in this section, so there's still a few cut and changed Pokemon ideas I can talk about, but once again, I'm going to save most of the ideas I took out of this England region until I do other British regions. Okay, the first removed Pokemon idea we have is one that would have been based on a creature called the Black Dog, which is a ghostly and demonic dog that has supposedly been seen by many people throughout England, but there are claims about it throughout the entire United Kingdom too. I mean, the description of it is so specific that I really couldn't picture it being something other than a ghost type or potentially a dark ghost type. Not the craziest typing ideas by any means, but I felt like they fit this Pokemon concept pretty well. Why I ended up removing this idea was because there was already a ton of dog Pokemon in the region, with the starter, the Lillipup line, the Houndour line, and then the Rockruff line, and I felt like having another dog Pokemon would have been just a little bit too much, so I decided to take it out. Another common Pokemon idea I had for this region was one based on a creature in English folklore called the Hob. Hopefully I'm understanding the mythology correctly here, but a Hob is a creature that's similar in many ways to a goblin or a brownie, where it's a small creature that can either be very helpful with working farmland, but if offended they can become a huge nuisance. My early idea with this Pokemon was for it to be a pure normal type, but it would have an ability where if it used a certain move, or perhaps it got beneath a certain amount of health, it would change into a fighting type Pokemon and have a slight form change to look more aggressive. While I liked the general concept I had for the Hob Pokemon, I never quite found a design I was super satisfied with, and I also started rethinking its ability a lot too. I kept trying to make this Pokemon work right up to a few weeks before the England regional video launched, but I just couldn't nail the concept down and I ended up taking the Pokemon out of the video. Shifting over to one of the Pokemon ideas I had that changed around a little bit in the early planning was the Steampunk Pokemon. Now initially, there was a lot of sketches for a steampunk Pokemon, and before I settled on the Fire Steel type one we see in the final video, there was actually an Electric Steel type sketch that really caught my interest too. I did end up going with the Fire Steel type ones and making them the pseudo-legendary of the region, but I love the Electric Steel type ones so much, so don't be surprised if they show up in a future regional video. The last cut Pokemon idea, and I'm sorry my voice is really giving out on me now, but we're almost there, was a legendary that would have tied into the story via the London town. There's an old English legend about a giant called Gog Magog, and while there's a lot of backstory with him I won't go over, the general idea is that over the years he became known as two giants, Gog and Magog, and they're said to be the guardians of London. I thought the idea of a giant protector of London sounded really interesting, and I brainstormed an idea where the London city in this Pokemon region had a giant rock-type Pokemon, somewhat reminiscent of Regirock, lying dormant beneath it. It would have been in a deep sleep for centuries, but Team Imperium returning to the region would have awakened it. You guys hear me say this a lot, but I really wanted to do this idea, but I just didn't have enough time to fully commission the art of it, as well as adjust and modify the story so it could fit in. I had the general concept of it down, but I just needed some more time to work out how exactly it could fit into the story. Alright, let's finish up this video by talking about all of the story and narrative related cut content. Now, if my voice sounds a little bit lower, it's because I am at peak sickness right now, and I don't feel very good, but I'm still gonna power through. I love my regional videos, I love talking about cut content, so let's go over the story section and some of the ideas that I took out of the narrative. Let's start off with a small idea and work our way up to some of the big ones. So the first idea I ended up taking out relatively early on was an idea where the player character would actually have a sister. Basically, in the early stages of planning the narrative, I knew the player would live on a Mareep farm with their mother, but I started thinking that maybe two people running a large farm on their own might not be the most realistic thing ever. So I planned out a sister for the player character, as well as a herdier who I named Harry that would help out in the daily farm work. The general idea with them is that your sister would almost become a pseudo-rival for you, and at a couple points in the story would show up with your family's herdier to deliver something to you from your mother. She would also slowly build up a team, and by the end of the game would be a somewhat potent rival akin to Richard. She would still technically be a breeder and work on the family farm, which is why she doesn't go all in on Pokemon battling, but there would be a slight sibling rivalry that comes out between the two of you. In the end, while I liked the overall idea of this, I felt like it didn't really add a ton to the story, and more than anything, kind of made the intro drag on just a little bit too long. From a story perspective, I think it was alright, but getting a little bit meta and looking at the general time the intro took, where I explained the backstory of the region, then the region in the present, then you go into the play, I felt like if I added even more dialogue to the intro, I might have made it feel just a little bit too long and like I wasn't getting to the real action of the story fast enough, so I ended up removing the sister as well as Harry the herdier. The next idea I took out, and I'm sorry, my voice is really giving out, I can't laugh, it hurts, was a huge idea that has so many layers and extensions to it, so I'm just gonna try and break it down piece by piece. So very early on when I was planning this region, I knew that I wanted to have Looker show up. Generally, I try not to reference official Pokemon characters in my regions because I'm worried I might not get their official characterization down, or something I do with them might conflict with something they officially do in the mainline games, but I made an exception for Looker because he's become kind of a character that shows up in almost every Pokemon generation and game. Now, rather than making Looker lean into his Doctor Who inspiration, which I did think about for a brief period of time, I had an idea to make Looker instead pay homage to another famous British property, James Bond. Now, in my head, this made perfect sense. James Bond is a British spy, and within the Pokemon universe, Looker is basically his equivalent. Looker is part of the International Police and has done all sorts of spy work throughout the games he's shown up in. Along with making Looker pay reference to Bond, I also had an idea to explore the International Police a little bit more as well. One of their big headquarters would have been in the region, located in the London town, and they would have personally sent Looker out into the region to investigate the strange reports they've been receiving about Team Imperium. Now, I liked this idea a lot, but as I kept planning things out, I felt like something was missing. It was then that I realized that in recent Pokemon games, Looker is usually seen with a partner of some kind. In X and Y, he had Emma, in Sun and Moon, he had Annabelle, but in this England region, I hadn't planned for him to have any assistants, which I started to feel was a little bit empty. At that point, I started brainstorming potential partners Looker could have in the region. Because Looker would be very serious and stoic in the region, I started brainstorming someone that would be a good foil for him. Someone that's a little bit quirky and clumsy, but still has a good heart despite how bad they might be at their job. In early drafts, I referred to this character as the Mr. Bean to Looker's James Bond, and that's ultimately what ended up inspiring this character. Long story short, the character I came up with to be Looker's partner was a new transfer from the International Police's Unova division, and was assigned to Looker as a junior partner, where Looker would be his mentor. I never gave this character a name, but for the sake of codenames, let's call him Plain, because being plain is the opposite of being a Looker. So Looker and Plain's dynamic would almost be like a father and sons, where Looker is very serious and trying to get things done with exact precision, while Plain is a little bit of a goofball, and while he's still doing his best and trying to take things seriously, he oftentimes messes up and makes things a lot worse, much to the ire of Looker. Now, this idea was coming along pretty well in my opinion, but then I had another idea to layer on top of it. This is where things get really crazy, but I had the idea of what if we still had Looker and Plain in the region with their whole dynamic, but with the added twist that Plain was a double agent for Team Imperium. I initially loved this idea, but the more I thought about it, the more I kept coming back to one solid issue with it, which was that I ultimately felt like it would take away from the big twist at the end of the story when you find out that one of the gym leaders / Elite Four members is also working with Team Imperium. In my mind, that moment at the end of the video was supposed to give people kind of like an "oh crap, this is crazy" type shock. But if you already have a moment like that earlier in the video where Looker's partner turns out to be evil and you already say "oh crap, this is insane," then the second twist towards the end wouldn't have the same impact. I felt like having Plain be revealed to be evil before Nero drops the huge shocker on everybody would have taken away from the moment, which made me ultimately back away from the idea of Plain being a double agent. It was at that point that I also started doubting the entire idea of Looker having a partner in the first place. Don't get me wrong, I thought it was a fun idea, but it added a ton of pages that didn't really amount to anything. Without the twist of Looker's partner being a double agent, Pling was just a fun side character that I felt could ultimately be cut out of the video, and so I decided to revert Looker back to being solo again and trying to solve Team Imperium's motives on his own. I also went away from the international police and James Bond angle and decided to make Looker a little more lighthearted in the region to kind of reference the Cut partner character, which is where the Sherlock Holmes homage came from as well. The last story idea I cut out was a small story beat that described a special post-game episode you would get to do after becoming champion of the region. As I hope we all remember, at the end of the story, Nero reveals that one of the gym leaders or Elite Four members sent him the plan to take over the region, which means that one of the 13 of them is a traitor to this England region. Where this removed idea comes into play is that I had an idea for a post-game side quest where you and Looker would team up and track down the 13 different trainers and interrogate/battle them to find out if they're the ones who did it. The general flow of this side quest would be that you get to go around to different areas in the region, ranging from the Minnick Theater to the end of Hadrian's Wall to a secluded area in the Lake District, and you would get to have a special post-game battle against most of the gym leaders and Elite Four members, where they would have remixed teams before they all tell you that they didn't do it. I ended up removing this idea because I felt like the mystery of one of the gym leaders or Pokemon League members betraying the region was a little more powerful when I didn't go through and explain you and Looker interrogating everyone, and just left the story on a little bit of a cliffhanger. I know that technically I did reveal who the secretly evil person was in the post-credits sequence of the official video, but that's something us the audience knows, and I felt like if Arthur or Looker in story found out that she was evil, it would sort of dampen the mysterious and somewhat tense feeling at the end of the narrative. And that's all the cut content and ideas I had from the England Pokemon region. Not quite as many as some of my other regional videos, but they're still all ideas that more often than not I wanted to put into the final video, but wasn't able to implement due to time, budget, or the audio messing up because my microphone really sucks. Anyways, what do you guys think? Any of these ideas you like and wish I kept in the official England region? Maybe some of them you're glad I took out. Let me know what you guys think of all this removed content in the comments section below. I'm sorry I'm so sick right now, and hopefully my sickness didn't distract from the actual ideas of the video, but anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you later.